The year was 2010. We had 3 sons at this point. We had left all family behind and we were searching for a new church. I was looking for an Awana program that had cubbies. We found one and began a new journey. We went to our new church for the first time, and it was different than anything we were used to. We noticed there were a lot more women than men. During the announcements, we found out that the men were all on a retreat, including the pastor. But we loved the man that filled in for him, and a new adventure had begun for all of us. The following week, we met the pastor, and we entered the sanctuary. And I felt the loving arms of God wrap around our little family unit. It was the first time my husband and I had felt accepted. We just never felt accepted by our own families. And this was God showing us how much we were loved. I especially needed this since every Sunday from that point on, I was guaranteed to be moved to tears by the message, the worship, and by God's amazing love. I ended up buying some waterproof mascara and accepted each week I could be crying during the service. One service that especially struck me was during the announcements. We saw an ad for the Wounded Woman. It was a new group that would be starting for building relationships, reading a book, and seeing hope for the first time in my life. My husband and each one of my sons nudged me and said, "You are doing this." There would be a men's group on the same night as well as childcare, so there was no reason for us not to do this. The first night I was astounded by the size of the group of women that came to start this Wounded Woman group. Over time, though, a lot of women left. Most weren't ready to go as deep as we had gone, or just didn't have time to give to a weekly group, but I was ready. I wasn't prepared, though, for this life-changing experience. I broke barriers, walls came down, and the chains were broken that bound me so tight I couldn't grow and accept me for me. Some other things that I realized during this time were that certain people needed to be removed at this stage for me to allow God's work in me. I needed critical people out and people to just love on me to make this very life-altering change possible and to not become undone by one unkind word. Another aspect to this was my environment. I felt I was a plant withering without water, sunlight, or sustenance. After starting this church, I felt nourished, radiant, glowing in the perfect environment with people that really cared. And during this process, I had 2 very powerful episodes of release. It's kind of hard to explain, but I was a stuffer. I stuffed my parents' divorce, blaming myself for years for the failure of their marriage. I stuffed all those insults, put downs, injustices, and just plain mean people for 31 years. From the time I was 5 until this point when I was 36. I was a big heart walking around with those daggers, swords, and knives still fresh in me. But for the first time in my life, I was experiencing peace. I had no idea what true peace to the core felt like before. My husband used to tell me that he was a student of his wife. From the books he read, this one statement was something that he really took to heart. He knows what my favorite drink is, dessert, food, and he can even go shopping for me in complete confidence that I won't return anything that he bought me. He is just that in tune to me. So during the study, I prayed one night to God that I wanted to be a student of him. I wanted to learn what the teacher wanted me to learn from this study. He gave me so much. I was overwhelmed at the level he fed me. It was such a moving time for me, and I relished every minute of it. I was not expecting what came at the end of this journey. We were to share our testimonies, only if we felt called to do so. I was so nervous. I had never written my testimony before. I had never shared my story before. No one even really knew about my home life before because of the level of shame I felt living with my mother and my sister. How was I supposed to write my story? I cannot tell you how many drafts I ended up doing. I would go to my husband and I read the first draft. It was a breeze. He told me, "You haven't gone deep enough." I exited a little confused but tried again. Again he said, "It's not deep enough." My final draft, I could barely read it aloud without tears flowing, shaking and trembling at all I was revealing. He finally said, "That's it." I was terrified. I had to share the story with women I had just met, really putting myself out there. I prayed with 2 women beforehand who reassured me that the enemy was going to be quaking in his boots and would no longer have a hold on me. It was a defining moment for me because I was going to soar like the bird God always wanted and knew I could be. This was just the beginning of a very powerful transformation in me, though. I would never forget letting go of that little girl scarred by her past and turning into a strong woman capable of facing any challenge head on without hesitation. A warrior was born. The last day of our study, we had a dinner and wrote on helium-filled balloons issues we wanted to release. And at the end of the night, we left in our cars and let go of those balloons, and with them the issues that kept us paralyzed, and a new start came for me. I realized at this point how grateful I was for my husband and all these very special women that saw me through one of the most definitive moments of my life. Something else also occurred during this time. I was also a little slower in intellect than my husband. He was challenged so many times in communicating with me and hung in there patiently waiting for me to one day blossom in front of his eyes. Well, when that little girl in me finally grew up, I was able to match him. I was able to finish his sentences. We were finally mentally matched as one. It was exciting. This poor man had the patience of Job as he waited 19 years for me to finally get it. A truly magical time had just occurred. My husband and I were connected, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, the way God meant for marriage to be. We began healing in our sons and in our family unit, and for the first time, we were united, not allowing any division to take place. The boys stuck up for each other and came immediately to the defense of both my husband and I if anyone had a negative word to say. It was a time that I never thought would occur. But blessings came to us, and it was a time that I believe our family unit was the happiest. There is more to come with this journey in my own personal growth, and I pray that everyone could experience what I did at this moment in time. Again, the book was The Wounded Woman by Dr. Steve Stevens and Pam Redevelt. I hope I pronounced that right. Journals were given to each one of us. We also did a collage on the first night and a collage at the end of it. I can't tell you the difference between both of the collages. It was like night and day. But this was only the beginning of a very powerful time in my life. May you all have a blessed week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week to continue my courageous steps toward accepting this whole me.